So drivers for a middle layer, what is this all about? Well, I see this as being three key drivers. There's appetite for reusing legacy assets, and there's some good reasons for that, right? They've got existing products, the integration works. You can reuse these things rather than going through that heart and lung surgery to rip that out and replace it, avoid all of that risk. And actually, one of the observations here is legacy systems are often cheap to run. They're stable, they work, right? But perhaps they're not in the right place. And that brings us to participating in a digital ecosystem. So one of the things I often say to brokers, MGAs, insurers, vendors to the insurance market is that it's always been an ecosystem. Lots of participants in there, reinsurers, reinsurance brokers, very collaborative industry. But now a lot of that collaboration is happening through APIs, through automation, through machine to machine discussion. And actually, that's part of the key here. So, participating not just in an ecosystem, but a digital ecosystem enabled by APIs, enabling customer engagement, distribution, data enrichment, claims resolution. We'll talk about some of those shortly as well. The third key driver is one that's been around forever and is perpetually there for insurers. They always want to go quicker. So we call this agility, but it's about partly around faster delivery of new propositions to market, reducing cost of that. And actually, once you can go faster and at lower cost with this sort of change, you enable innovation as well. And this is a key enabling capability that insurers are looking for. But there's some challenges, right? Legacy is not good at doing APIs. Legacy systems typically predate some of the APIs, and even relatively modern systems can have APIs that maybe aren't quite up to scratch for a modern digital ecosystem. So there's some tension there between reusing those existing assets, but being a participant in a digital ecosystem. Equally, point number 7 on here, legacy systems were often built before this idea of DevOps. There's lots of engineering discipline that's changed in recent years. As we look at agility, as we look at that speed to market, the arrival of DevOps, increased interest in low and no code solutions as well. We've got faster at building things, and some of these legacy systems were built before many of those innovations came to fruition. So there's a natural tension there in terms of legacy pulls against the agility that we could deliver, but there still feels like there's an opportunity to get that speed, be that participant in a digital ecosystem without having to sacrifice or replace all of those things that we've invested in over the last decades in the insurance industry. So, why are insurers looking at this idea of a middle layer, a middle office? Well, actually, it's partly in response to these drivers. So let's get our arms around what does the insurance middle layer is, what does it do? So, features of a digital insurance middle layer. So it typically fits between digital, that being this ever expanding list of ways that customers want to talk to the insurance industry, and actually suppliers, partners want to talk to insurers, MGAs, brokers, etc. Gone are the days where it was just a website. Now it's a quote and buy website for sales. Maybe it's policy administration through a mobile app. Maybe it's chatbot for claims servicing. Maybe it's through SMS. Maybe it's through direct messages on Twitter or Facebook. Lots and lots of channels coming in this ever expanding set of requirements around digital being flexible and automated in there. At the back, then, we've got this idea of the core. So the core here is there things that administer all of those policies. administer the claims, administer the quotes, make all of this stuff happen, and do that in a regulatory compliant way, which means different things if you're a broker or an MGA or an insurer. But the core is this idea of the engine that runs the business. And the middle tier then serves as the glue between the two, the translation layer, the jam in our sandwich, if you like. So we're going to talk a little bit about how does the middle tier talk to interact with digital. What does it mean between middle tier and core? And then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of those ingredients that go into that middle tier as well. So middle tier to digital is really about RESTful APIs. RESTful APIs, open APIs, whatever you want to call them. That's the key driver, or the engineering discipline, the solution that's dominant at the moment. There are some places with GraphQL APIs make sense, particularly in heavy data applications. But for the most part, it's about middle tier surfacing up an API that all those different digital layers can tap into easily, in a way that's native to those digital layers now. But actually the brains, the design, the data, and all of that sits behind the API. If we then look at below the API, the middle tier, this is about how does the middle tier talk to the core. The optimal case here would be that actually that would be through APIs as well. But as discussed, sometimes those legacy systems, those older systems that you want to reuse that still have value, but they don't have an API. So you get this idea of direct integration capabilities that might be part of that middle tier. So tapping directly into some of those old systems, maybe directly into the data sources as well. And we're also seeing folks deploying RPA in there as well. So using robots to drive the legacy systems and create the appearance of an API, create the appearance of this integration for use. So this is allows the middle tier. You can see now that the middle tier needs to be quite. There needs to be some intelligence there, some rules in there, so that it can translate the API that you want to offer to all of these digital tiers into something that then the core can understand and translate those different interaction mechanisms between the different core systems and hide some of that complexity. So, one of the challenges around middle tiers is the exact scope seems to vary by implementation, as we say here. And really that's about what is the problem the insurer trying to solve. And many of those problems sit on the right-hand side of the diagram here. But let's go through the middle and we'll cover that in just a second. So middle tier, minimum viable product. What is what's the basics, the middle bit that goes into that middle tier? APIs, absolutely core to it. If you take one thing away from this, middle tier is about APIs, but it's a bit deeper than that, right? The middle tier needs to have some smarts to it. It needs to have something of a brain in there. So it needs this idea of orchestration, being able to, based on the response from a data enrichment provider, tap into the pricing ecosystem or the claims provider's ecosystem in a different way. There needs to be some business rules in there, some capability to orchestrate things between different participants in the ecosystem. And then, of course, monitoring sits in there as well, something that the non-engineering folks maybe forget, but us in IT wonder about. When you're tapping into a wider ecosystem through a digital means and you're looking for that kind of real-time interaction, you need something that monitors those capabilities. So that's the minimum, right? That's the bare minimum of what I'd want from a middle tier. But let's talk about some of those broader capabilities and problems that insurers are trying to solve in that wider halo. So on the top right there, we've got this idea of distribution networks. And again, this is about tapping into new digital ways of getting customers into the insurance industry. And sometimes that's through blockchain, that's with IoT data, or maybe that's just with a platform that has many of the brokers on it and many of the insurers. Regardless of what it is, the middle tier is about translating things, leveraging that distribution network, and then orchestrating all of the activities that need to happen internally in order to respond to that. And we can say the same thing about pricing, in terms of using data enrichment, using new pricing capabilities in order to come up with the right price for the customer at the right time. Claims providers ecosystem, whether that's repair networks for vehicles or whether that's networks of tradesmen who are repairing properties. This is about orchestrating all of those capabilities that are going on there, and where they're digital, where they are capable of being engaged through a digital manner, doing that through something that maybe sits outside of the core system or the claim system. InsurTech ecosystem and tapping into that, all of those new startups, all of that new capability, that the exciting innovation that's going on. And again, many of those InsurTech only talk APIs. They don't actually talk anything else. The middle tier often being the route to engaging with those as well. On the left-hand side, on the top there, we've got some different examples around data as well. When to leverage a data enrichment ecosystem, when to start tapping into those data providers. But on the other way, when you start to see IoT data coming from the customers and an event has happened, how do you as an organization want to respond to that, and perhaps respond to that automatically, actually? And this is an area where middle tiers or insurers, MGAs are starting to invest in this kind of middle tier in order to start orchestrating the behavior as those IoT events come in as well. AI models, lots of participants in the insurance industry building out AI capabilities and building AI models, but where do you put them so that they can have the impact that you want them to have, whether it's in claims triage, maybe pricing, maybe the way that you respond to distributors. Where do you put that in order to have that effect? And actually, this concept of the middle tier with its orchestration capability, tapping in to those smarts within the AI models, is one solution to doing that as well. And we're also seeing folks in the insurance industry not just buying these large chunks of software. So, a new policy system, a new claims system, a rating system, but actually buying smaller pieces, smaller microservices, maybe just to deal with claims triage, maybe underwriting triage, maybe looking at how the bordereaux come into the organization, how you respond to that. So again, when you start looking at these smaller assets, these new opportunities, how do you bring them in? How do you integrate them into everything else? And then how do you orchestrate around them so you make the best use of them? And again, this is a place where the middle tier really plays its part. We've already covered RPA and integration schemes on the previous slide. We'll talk about product composition in a couple of slides' time as well. But this gives you an idea of some of the ingredients here as well. And as we look through into, maybe if I just put the slides up there we go. If we look through into the target position, you get this idea of a heterogeneous architecture. It's a big word, isn't it? But an architecture with lots of different moving parts in it. Maybe some old systems, some old data that still works, coupled with this idea around microservices. But this idea of an API that's contributed to by the internal capabilities there in orange, but also by external capabilities there in green. So the bottom left of the diagram there, you can see that maybe other insurers, other MGAs, other participants in the ecosystem are adding their services, their capabilities to your API so that you can better serve your customers. And then, of course, on the other side of the API, you've got the digital side there. So if you think the things below the API as being that core, the things above the API is that digital. So you've got your own channels that you're trying to service, your contact center, the web channel to the direct customer, maybe to the broker, maybe through MGAs. But then you've also got third parties leveraging your APIs, leveraging your capabilities, selling your products through different third party channel systems. There is a digital route as well. There's this key idea here around being an API first insurer, thinking about delivering the API and then that enabling all of those digital capabilities. I remember back in the 2000s, we saw insurers becoming we're an internet insurer. Well, now in the 2020s, we're talking about becoming an API enabled, an API first insurer, or an API first MGA, an API first broker. So increasingly, the heavier middle tier is allowing insurers to compose products into more complete propositions. So this is that box that we saw a couple of slides ago. This idea that actually you can take some of those products that exist in multiple back-end systems that you have, multiple parts of that core, and compose them in different ways. Suddenly you can have a multi-car product, or a whole household product, or a commercial combined product, and offering in different ways. So this isn't particularly new, but the one that's interesting now is this idea of the insurance product is an API. The proposition that you build by composing these things creates a new API that then other folks, maybe a broker portal, maybe the brokers themselves, agent systems, and underwriting desktop can start to leverage that proposition in order to offer a different type of product, which is an interesting capability. And one of the things I wanted to pull out here when we're talking about this is this is not just about an API gateway. This is about insurance content in a middle layer, delivering new capabilities in an insurance context. This is very much about an insurance middle layer. And we'll hear a little bit from Martin, I'm sure, shortly, around some of the capabilities that they have. So they've gone a little further than this, in that their middle layer can actually host products and produce products itself. So actually, if you had something that was entirely new, entirely different, middle layer offers the opportunity to either tap into that InsurTech ecosystem to get that new capability, that new product, or in some cases to host that product itself as well.